It was supposed to be a routine panel discussion on the show. What nobody expected was that Tucker Carlson would walk onto that stage with an agenda to completely humiliate Zohran Mamdani, a rising star in progressive politics, in front of millions of viewers. The moment Tucker opened his mouth, he made one critical mistake. He thought he could question the intelligence of a Harvard graduate, an activist, and one of the sharpest political minds challenging the establishment today. Zohran, sweetie, I'm not sure you understand the complexity of what we're discussing here. Maybe stick to what you know, whatever that is. The studio fell dead silent. The audience gasped. Even the other hosts looked shocked. But what happened next will go down in television history. Because Zohran Mamdani didn't just respond, he delivered a masterclass in intellectual destruction that left Tucker Carlson speechless, embarrassed, and completely exposed. Before we dive into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss these legendary political moments. Tucker Carlson walked onto the set with the same arrogance that had defined his career for decades. At Mahi, the veteran political commentator had spent years staying relevant by inserting himself into controversial political debates, often with a lack of understanding about the issues he was discussing. With his signature aggressive style, Tucker had built a reputation for cutting off guests, dismissing opposing viewpoints, and using his platform to belittle anyone who disagreed with his far-right agenda. He had feuded with liberals, attacked progressives, and now he had set his sights on a new target. The producers had booked him as a guest host, knowing his controversial nature would drive ratings. What they didn't expect was that he'd use the opportunity to launch a personal attack on their featured guest. Zohran Mamdani sat across from him, representing everything Tucker couldn't stand. Young, brilliant, a person of color, successful, and completely unimpressed by celebrity status. At just 32, Zohran had already accomplished more than most people could ever dream of in their lifetimes. Harvard graduate, activist, fighting for social justice, and a powerful voice in the New York State Assembly, making waves in Albany with his sharp analysis of systemic inequality and his commitment to progressive reform. He had gained national attention for his tireless work to bring social justice policies to the forefront of American politics, cutting through political nonsense with surgical precision, and his refusal to back down from anyone regardless of their fame or status. The topic was immigration reform, Zohran's area of expertise. He'd come on the show to discuss his new legislation aimed at addressing systemic inequality in the immigration system. It should have been a straightforward interview, but Tucker had other plans. He spent the commercial break making snide comments about these young politicians who think they know everything, questioning whether Zohran was truly qualified to be making policy. The stage was set for a collision between old-school media arrogance and new political brilliance. The stakes couldn't have been higher, not just for these two men, but for what this moment would represent about respect, intelligence, and the changing of the guard in American political discourse. The audience sensed the tension. The other co-hosts looked uncomfortable, and Zohran Mamdani sat there calm and composed, having no idea he was about to deliver one of the most devastating intellectual beatdowns in television history. The conversation started innocently enough. Zohran Mamdani was explaining the nuances of his immigration reform bill, breaking down complex policy issues in a way that everyday viewers could understand. His expertise was obvious to everyone watching, and he was doing exactly what good politicians should do, making complicated issues accessible to the public. That's when Tucker Carlson decided to interrupt the flow of the conversation in a way that would prove to be a massive mistake. He waved his hand dismissively and told Zohran to hold on, questioning whether he really thought the average person understood what he was talking about since he was using all these policy terms. Tucker then made his first condescending comment by suggesting that Zohran was still pretty new to this political game. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable to everyone in the studio and watching at home. Zohran paused, his eyebrows raising slightly, but he maintained his composure and responded professionally. He told Tucker that he had been involved in activism for over a decade, had been a leader in local politics, and was currently serving in the New York State Assembly, so he thought he had a pretty good grasp of the policy concepts at play. But Tucker wasn't backing down from his attack. If anything, Zohran's calm and professional response seemed to irritate him more, as if he was frustrated that he couldn't rattle the younger man. Tucker decided to escalate his attack by claiming he had been in the media business longer than Zohran had been alive. This was when Zohran delivered his first correction of the day, interjecting smoothly that actually Tucker hadn't been in the business longer than he'd been alive. Zohran pointed out that he was 32 years old, and Tucker had started his career in the 1990s, so the math didn't quite work out the way Tucker claimed. A few audience members chuckled at this gentle but effective correction, but Tucker's face was turning red. He clearly didn't like being corrected, especially not on national television in front of millions of viewers, and his frustration was becoming visible to everyone watching. This is where Tucker made his fatal mistake that would lead to his complete destruction on live television. Instead of gracefully moving on from his embarrassing error, he decided to go personal and attack Zohran's intelligence directly. He called Zohran sweetie in a patronizing tone and told him he wasn't sure he understood the complexity of what they were discussing. Tucker claimed these issues were more complicated than whatever Zohran had learned in his activism and policy training, and suggested that maybe he should stick to what he knew, whatever that was. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and everyone in the studio immediately understood that a line had been crossed. The other co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly uncomfortable with the personal attack they had just witnessed. You could literally hear gasps from the audience as people realized what had just happened. Sunny host looked mortified by what her guest host had just said. Joy Bihar's mouth fell open in shock. Even Sarah Haynes, who was usually the peacemaker on the show, looked shocked by the blatant disrespect that had just been displayed. But the most telling reaction came from Whoopi Goldberg, who slowly turned to look at Tucker Carlson with an expression that clearly said he had just made a huge mistake. Zohran Mamdani sat there for exactly 3 seconds, and those 3 seconds felt like an eternity to everyone watching. To viewers at home, it looked like he was simply processing what had just been said to him, trying to understand how someone could be so disrespectful on national television. But those who knew him and had followed his political work recognized something else entirely. He wasn't processing the insult. He was choosing his weapons for the intellectual battle that was about to begin. His expression didn't change from its calm, professional demeanor. His voice remained controlled and steady, but there was something in his eyes that should have warned Tucker about what was coming next. A look that anyone familiar with his policy work would have recognized immediately. He asked Tucker if he had heard him correctly, his voice deceptively soft and controlled. He wanted to confirm that Tucker had just questioned his intelligence and dismissed his extensive work in immigration policy as little more than naive activism. The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras adjusting focus as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Instead of recognizing the danger he was in and perhaps apologizing for his disrespectful comments, Tucker made the catastrophic decision to double down on his attack. He told Zohran that he was just saying that having experience doesn't automatically make someone smart about everything. He claimed that he had been around politics longer than Zohran had been paying attention to it, suggesting that sometimes age and experience matter more than education and fresh ideas. He leaned back in his chair with a smug expression, clearly thinking he had just delivered a knockout punch that would put the younger man in his place. He had no idea that he had just handed Zohran Mamdani all the ammunition he needed to completely dismantle him on live television. Tucker's arrogance and condescension were about to meet their match in the form of one of the most intellectually devastating responses in television history. Zohran nodded slowly, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he prepared for what was about to happen. Anyone who had watched his speeches or policy arguments knew that smile well. It was the same expression he wore right before he absolutely destroyed flawed arguments and outdated systems with well-researched facts. He told Tucker that since he wanted to talk about experience and intelligence, they should do exactly that and have that conversation. The way he said it sent chills through the studio, and even the camera operators seemed to sense that something historic was about to happen. The tension in the room was building to a breaking point, and everyone could feel that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Tucker, completely oblivious to the danger he was in, just smiled and nodded confidently. He told Zohran to please enlighten them, still thinking he had the upper hand in this confrontation. He had just asked Zohran Mamdani to destroy him on national television, and Zohran was about to happily oblige in the most thorough and professional manner possible. Zohran Mamdani leaned forward slightly, his hands folded calmly on the table. When he spoke, his voice was measured, professional, and absolutely lethal. Zohran began by addressing Tucker Carlson directly, telling him that since he had questioned his qualifications and intelligence, he would help him understand exactly who he was talking to. Zohran explained that he graduated with honors from Harvard University with a degree in political science and then completed his work in policy studies with a focus on immigration reform, the very issues they were discussing today. The audience was riveted, and you could feel the tension building throughout the studio. He continued by describing how after his academic work, he became deeply involved in grassroots activism, representing immigrant communities, fighting for rights, and advocating for systemic reform at local and national levels. He had organized legal workshops, mobilized communities, and worked with legal professionals to ensure fair treatment for marginalized groups. Then he became a member of the New York State Assembly, where he authored and passed significant immigration reform policies. Tucker's smug expression began to fade as the weight of Zohran's credentials became clear. Zohran wasn't finished building his case. He explained that he was currently serving on the Assembly's Social Justice Committee, where he regularly questioned policy experts, department heads, and national leaders about the complexities of immigration law and human rights. Just last month, he had been part of a bipartisan delegation that met with international scholars to discuss global immigration policies and reform. He paused, letting that information sink in before turning the tables on Tucker completely. Since Tucker had established that experience matters more than education, Zohran asked him what exactly his qualifications were to question his intelligence on policy matters. He wanted to know Tucker's background in immigration, constitutional law, or social justice reform. The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall, and everyone in the studio knew that Tucker had no answer. Tucker opened his mouth to respond, but Zohran wasn't finished with his systematic destruction. He told Tucker he would help him out since he seemed confused about his own qualifications. Zohran explained that Tucker's background was in political commentary and media, that he had spent decades hosting a cable news show, offering opinions on various topics, and generating buzz with inflammatory rhetoric. That was his expertise, nothing more. The audience was completely silent, mesmerized by the systematic destruction taking place before their eyes. Zohran reminded Tucker that he had mentioned being around politics longer than Zohran had been paying attention, but pointed out that he had been studying immigration reform, policy, and human rights while Tucker was delivering partisan diatribes on national television. Zohran was just getting started with his intellectual assault. He reached into his folder and pulled out some papers, preparing to deliver what would become the most devastating fact check in television history. He told everyone that since Tucker seemed to have forgotten some recent political commentary, he would remind them of his track record. 3 weeks ago, Tucker had falsely claimed that immigration reform could only be achieved by eliminating all border security, when in fact, comprehensive reform involved balanced measures to ensure security and legal immigration pathways. 2 months ago, he incorrectly stated that immigrants take jobs away from American workers, without offering any empirical evidence or studies to support his claim. Tucker's face was now completely red as he tried to interrupt, but Zohran's voice never wavered as he continued his methodical destruction. Last month, Tucker Carlson had tweeted that the Constitution was written in 1796, when it was actually written in 1787. These weren't opinion differences, Zohran Mamdani explained. These were basic facts that any experienced political commentator should know. The personal destruction continued as Zohran decided to address Tucker's real expertise. He pointed out that Tucker had built a career on bullying people on television, talking over guests, dismissing people he disagreed with, and using his platform to attack anyone who challenged his views. That wasn't political experience, Zohran explained. That was just bad behavior with a microphone. The studio was electric with tension, and even the crew members were staring in amazement at what they were witnessing. Zohran asked Tucker if he wanted to question his intelligence when he had spent his entire career advocating for the rights of marginalized communities, fighting for immigration reform, and making real tangible changes in people's lives. He wanted to know what Tucker had done besides tweet insults and interrupt people on TV shows. Zohran wasn't done with his demonstration. He was about to give everyone watching a masterclass in exactly why you don't challenge a well-prepared activist without being ready for the consequences. He told Tucker that since he had mentioned these issues were complex, he would break down his current legislation since Tucker seemed confused. The Immigration Justice Reform Act of 2024 addresses three primary areas: family reunification, legal pathways to citizenship, and border security reform. Zohran began explaining his bill with the same precision he used in committee hearings, demonstrating his complete mastery of the subject matter. Section 1 establishes a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants who have been in the country for more than 5 years. Section 2 creates a comprehensive framework for family reunification, ensuring that family members separated at the border are brought together. Section 3 focuses on sensible border security reform, ensuring that immigration enforcement is both humane and effective. Each section includes specific implementation timelines, funding allocations, and oversight mechanisms. The bill was drafted in consultation with immigration law experts from Harvard, Yale, and Georgetown, reviewed by leading policy organizations, and endorsed by humanitarian groups nationwide. Zohran looked directly at Tucker, his voice steady and strong as he prepared to deliver the final devastating blow. He told Tucker that since he had established that he knew better about these complex issues, he wanted him to explain which specific provisions of his legislation he disagreed with and why, and to use legal precedent to support his argument. He would wait for the response. The silence was deafening as Tucker sat there, mouth slightly open, completely unable to respond. He had been intellectually eviscerated on live television, and everyone in the studio knew it. Zohran said quietly that he thought so, and then delivered the line that would become legendary. Next time you want to question someone's intelligence, maybe make sure you're qualified to have that conversation. The studio erupted in the aftermath of this intellectual destruction. The audience leapt to their feet, applauding thunderously, and even some of the crew members were clapping. It was clear that everyone had just witnessed something extraordinary, a moment that would be talked about for years to come. Whoopi Goldberg was shaking her head with a mixture of amazement and respect for what she had just witnessed. Sunny Host was applauding enthusiastically, clearly impressed by the masterful way Zohran Mamdani had handled the attack. Joy Behar looked like she had just watched a masterpiece performance, which in many ways she had, and Tucker Carlson sat there completely destroyed and unable to form a coherent response to save his dignity after being so thoroughly outclassed on national television. The commercial break couldn't come fast enough for Tucker Carlson. As soon as the camera stopped rolling, he stood up abruptly, muttering something about needing air, and walked off the set. He didn't return for the rest of the show. Backstage, producers were frantically discussing what they'd just witnessed. One staff member was overheard saying, "I've never seen anything like that. He just got completely dismantled." Meanwhile, Zohran Mamdani calmly continued with the rest of the interview, discussing his Immigration Justice Reform Act with the remaining co-host, Wayne, as if he hadn't just delivered one of the most devastating intellectual beatdowns in television history. Whoopi Goldberg, clearly impressed, commented on air, "Well, I think we all just learned not to come for Zohran Mamdani unless we're prepared for that level of response." Within minutes of the show airing, social media exploded with reactions. The hashtag #ZohranDestroys Tucker began trending nationwide, accumulating over 500,000 tweets in the first hour. Conservative reactions poured in with messages like, "Zohran Mamdani just gave a masterclass in how to handle right-wing bullies." That was beautiful to watch. And when you try to question a Harvard-educated policy expert's intelligence on national TV and get completely schooled, this is legendary. Even liberal supporters were forced to acknowledge the defeat with comments like, "I'm a Democrat, and even I have to admit, Tucker got absolutely destroyed. Zohran Mamdani is incredible." And that wasn't a debate. That was a legal execution. Tucker had no business questioning that man's intelligence. The viral moments came fast and furious. The clip of Zohran Mamdani saying, "Mom, next time you want to question someone's intelligence, maybe make sure you're qualified to have that conversation," was shared over 2 million times across all platforms. A TikTok compilation of Tucker's factual errors, contrasted with Zohran's credentials, gained 5 million views in 24 hours. Major news outlets couldn't ignore the story. CNN ran a segment titled, "When Political Commentary Goes Wrong, the Mamdani-Carlson Exchange." Fox News featured the clip prominently with commentators praising Zohran's composure and expertise. MSNBC initially tried to downplay the story, but eventually covered it when viewer demand became overwhelming. The Washington Post published an op-ed titled "Zohran Mamdani Shows How to Handle Bad Faith Attacks with Facts and Grace." Even international outlets picked up the story, with the BBC running a piece about American political discourse and the power of preparation. The producers of The View faced immediate backlash for allowing Tucker's attack to happen. Social media users demanded an apology to Zohran Mamdani. The next day, Whoopi Goldberg opened the show with a statement. "Yesterday, we witnessed an exchange that got out of hand. We want to be clear that The View supports respectful dialogue, and we apologize for any discomfort caused to our guest, Zohran Mamdani, who handled himself with remarkable grace and professionalism." Multiple sources reported that Tucker Carlson would not be invited back as a guest host anytime soon. Hours after the show, Tucker Carlson posted a series of tweets attempting to salvage his reputation. "Had a spirited discussion on The View today. Sometimes passion gets the better of us. Respect to Zohran Mamdani for his work, but the damage was done." Replies to his tweet were brutal, with responses like, "Spirited discussion? You questioned his intelligence and got exposed for your own ignorance. And that wasn't passionate, Tucker. That was arrogance meeting excellence." He deleted the tweets within 2 hours, but screenshots had already gone viral. Zohran Mamdani's colleagues in the New York State Assembly were quick to show support. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "This is what happens when you underestimate brilliant leaders. Zohran Mamdani handled that with grace and facts." Republican colleagues also praised his performance. One GOP assemblyman was quoted saying, "I disagree with his politics, but you have to respect that level of preparation and intelligence. He represented himself and his office with distinction." The incident became a case study in several important areas that would reshape how political commentary was approached across multiple industries. Communications experts began using the exchange as an example of how to handle hostile interviews and personal attacks, teaching their clients to follow Zohran Mamdani's model of remaining calm while systematically dismantling opposition arguments. Law schools started showing the clip as an example of maintaining professionalism under pressure while effectively advocating for your position, demonstrating how legal training could be applied beyond courtrooms. The moment sparked broader conversations about respect in political commentary and the difference between celebrity opinions and expert knowledge, forcing media outlets to reconsider how they paired guests in structured debates. For Zohran Mamdani, the incident elevated his national profile significantly in ways that would reshape his entire career trajectory. Speaking requests poured in from universities, legal organizations, and political groups who wanted to hear from the man who had handled such disrespect with such grace and intelligence. His legislation gained new co-sponsors as colleagues who had witnessed his performance recognized his competence and preparation. His social media following increased by over 300,000 in 1 week, giving him a powerful platform to advocate for his policy positions. Book publishers reached out about potential memoir deals, and major news networks offered contributor contracts. He had become a national figure overnight, transforming from a rising political leader to a recognized voice in American politics. For Tucker Carlson, the consequences were far less favorable and would impact his career for years to come. Several planned appearances were quietly canceled as producers worried about associating their shows with someone who had been so thoroughly embarrassed on national television. His social media engagement dropped significantly as many followers unfollowed his accounts, reducing his influence and marketability. Industry insiders reported that his chances of returning to mainstream television had been seriously damaged by the incident, as networks preferred to avoid the controversy and potential backlash that now surrounded his name. The Mamdani-Carlson exchange became a textbook example of what happens when preparation meets arrogance, demonstrating fundamental truths about modern political discourse. It showed the power of expertise over celebrity, facts over opinions, and grace under pressure in ways that resonated far beyond the television studio. Political commentators began referring to getting thoroughly outclassed in a debate as being Mamdani'd, a term that quickly entered the political lexicon and served as a warning to anyone considering taking on well-prepared opponents without doing their homework first. The educational implications of the exchange were immediate and far-reaching. Harvard University added the clip to their advocacy training curriculum, recognizing it as a masterclass in political argumentation and professional behavior under attack. The dean released a statement saying, Zohran Mamdani exemplified the best of legal and political education, using knowledge, preparation, and professionalism to advocate effectively for his positions. Rhodes College, his undergraduate alma mater, created a scholarship in his name for students pursuing careers in public service, ensuring that his example would inspire future generations of public servants to pursue excellence in their education and preparation. The incident marked a turning point in how celebrity political commentary was received by both audiences and industry professionals. Audiences became more discerning about the difference between fame and expertise, demanding that television personalities demonstrate actual knowledge rather than relying solely on their celebrity status to make political points. Television producers began doing more thorough background checks before pairing guests, particularly when controversial topics were involved. Realizing that mismatched debates could result in embarrassing moments that reflected poorly on their shows, the phrase, "Do your homework before you come for Zohran Mamdani," became a popular meme, warning others about the dangers of underestimating qualified professionals and serving as a reminder that preparation and expertise would always triumph over arrogance and assumption. Beyond politics, the exchange represented a broader cultural shift that extended far beyond the television studio where it occurred. It showed young people, particularly young women and people of color, that excellence and preparation were the best responses to discrimination and disrespect, providing a powerful example of how to handle bias with dignity and strength. It became a moment of pride for historically Black colleges and universities, law schools, and public defenders everywhere who saw their work validated on a national stage. The moment demonstrated that when faced with attempts to diminish their intelligence or qualifications, the most effective response was not anger or defensiveness, but rather a calm, systematic demonstration of superior knowledge and preparation. 6 months later, Zohran Mamdani's Immigration Justice Reform Act passed the New York State Assembly with bipartisan support, providing the ultimate vindication for his expertise and knowledge. In his floor speech, he thanked everyone who had supported the legislation, adding with a slight smile, "And to those who question whether I understood these complex issues, I hope today's vote provides some clarity." The comment drew laughter and applause from both sides of the aisle, proving that sometimes the best revenge is simply being excellent at your job and allowing your work to speak for itself. The confrontation between Tucker Carlson and Zohran Mamdani will be remembered as one of the most decisive intellectual victories in television history. It showed the power of preparation over arrogance, expertise over celebrity, and grace over aggression. In an era when political discourse often descends into shouting matches and personal attacks, Zohran Mamdani demonstrated how to handle disrespect with dignity while completely destroying your opponent with facts and professionalism. He didn't just win a debate, he delivered a masterclass in how to handle bullies, defend your qualifications, and represent your constituents with honor. And Tucker Carlson, he learned the hard way that when you question someone's intelligence, you better make sure you're smart enough to handle their response. What did you think of Zohran Mamdani's legendary response? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible political moments like this one. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we break down the most dramatic moments in American politics.